Uzi Rubin is an Israeli defense analyst who founded the country's missile defense organization in the 1990s. Now retired from the Israeli Defense Ministry, Rubin invited me to his home in the central town of Gadara for a conversation about the security challenges facing Israel today. Uzi Rubin, thank you so much for talking to VOA's Persian service today.
It's a privilege.
So I'd like to start by asking you about President Trump's latest decision on the nuclear deal. How important is it for Israel that President Trump has made one of his conditions for keeping America in the deal that Iran will have to stop its ballistic missile development?
I think it's crucial that Iran has a very extensive missile program that is highly destabilizing in the Middle East, whether it's nuclear or non-nuclear. And I think that the architects of the Iranian nuclear deal made a mistake in decoupling between the nuclear file and the missile file. One also wonders about that because in armed control deals with the Soviet Union at the time, and even actually with Russia, nuclear issue was always linked to the platform issue, delivery platform issue. So it was inseparable. And this is, I think, is the first arms control deal which clearly separates between the weapon and the carrying platform.
Why do you think that was done?
I think Obama sensed that if he insists, actually in the beginning it was structured together. And it was, the Iranians refused, and I think that President Obama evaluated that if he'll insist on that, he'll have no deal. And I think it was very important for him to get the deal. So he conceded on that point. I think he made a mistake. It's also a very bad precedent in the future. You think about North Korea, for instance. If you make a deal with them and separate between the delivery platform and the weapon, where do you end? It's the same thing. So I think in long term, short term, long term, it was a mistake, and I'm not sure whether it can be rectified. But I think that President Trump's direction is the correct direction.
Well, I want to ask you about that direction that he's going in. How likely do you think it is that Iran would accept a halt to its missile development as part of a revised nuclear deal from the U.S. perspective?
I think that there is a very little chance that Iran will back down on this. For them, this is their strategic force, whether nuclear or non-nuclear. They are using missile strategically, even without nuclear weapons. I mean, this is concept of the strategic importance of non-nuclear missiles is very strange in the West. In the West, missiles are always linked to nuclear weapons, and when they don't have nuclear weapons, they are not important. Not so in the Middle East. See what the Iranian missiles are doing now.
What are they doing?
Well, they are very active in Yemen, for instance, flanking Saudi Arabia from the south. And Iranian missile, I think it's now endorsed by the United Nations that missiles made in Iran are being used in order to attack Saudi Arabia, not just attack outlying districts like the south or towns like Jeddah, which is halfway to Riyadh. But Riyadh itself was attacked several times. I mean, it's the latest attack on downtown Riyadh was quite advertised, but much less so were advertised. There was no advertisement, or hardly any. On previous attacks, actually, the latest attack was the fifth or the sixth time already. Their major port, Jeddah, was attacked. Yanbu, the largest refinery. This is economic warfare. And innumerable times, all the outlying districts there near the south, near the Yemeni border, are constantly harassed by rocket and missile fire.
What about, from Israel's perspective, what are the Iranian missiles that most concern Israel?
Well, all of them, because the longer-range ones can reach Israel from Iran. The shorter-range ones can reach Israel from Lebanon. And Lebanon, I mean, Hezbollah now is part of, it used always part of the Iranian regime. They are part of the, they are working under the aegis of the Revolutionary Guards and the Quds Force, and they are part and parcel of Iran. So whatever range they have, actually, we have Iranian-made Grad rockets, short-range rockets. We used against Israel both in 2006, Lebanon war, and in all the engagements in the south. So more than that, the Iranians, by proxy, where they couldn't send rockets, they sent experts and machinery to make rockets. In the Gaza Strip, they bragged about it, that they smuggled in machinery during the Morsi time when the tunnels were quite active. Actually, it was a highway. You could smuggle anything you wanted in. All herds of cows or machinery for making rockets. It made machinery for making rocket fuel and rockets. And there are now actually two complexes, as far as I understand, one for the jihad, Islamic Jihad, and one for the Hamas. They are separate organizations, there's separate industry. That's my guess. I don't know about it, but that's my guess. And they bragged about taking Palestinians from Gaza to Iran and training them, on-the-job training in making rockets. So it's the rockets, it's their experts, it's their machinery.
What steps has Israel been taking to deal with these various kinds of Iranian missile and rocket threats, and how effective have those steps been?
Well, I think it's now quite official that Israel strategy, as outlined in the IDF, Israel Defense Force official strategy document, is designating the missiles and rockets as the major threat on Israel now. And the building of a multi-tier missile shield as one of the more important tasks in building up the country's defense. We have been working on missile defense, or multi-layer missile defense, since the 1990s, foreseeing already the Iranian, first the Syrian threat, which was generated by Iran, and then the Iranian threat. And over the years, we have developed a multi-layer defense system, which has 4 tiers. The lowest tier is the Iron Dome, which was the last to be developed and became operational about 7 years ago, and proved its mettle. That's the only one that was tested up to now, because we were not attacked by long-range ballistic missile, we were attacked by rockets. And I think that the effectiveness of Iron Dome was proven to one and all mainly during the last round of fighting in Gaza in summer of 2014. All the rest were not tested yet because, thanks God, we didn't have a shooting war with Iran, and I hope we'll never have.
I wanted to ask you about Israel's Arrow missile defense system, which you had a role in developing. How effective is that system now, and what do you think Israel needs to do more of in the future to counter Iranian missile threats?
Arrow 2, I was in charge of developing what's called the Arrow 2 system, which was the first one. It's fully deployed, it's fully operational too since the year 2000. It's almost 18 years ago. Fortunately, happily, it didn't see battle yet, except one occasion last year. There was a very strange incident of a Syrian anti-aircraft missile, an SA-5, a heavy missile, that were fired against Israeli aircraft that attacked Syria. And one of them flew in a threatening trajectory towards Israel, so an arrow took off and wiped it out. So in this particular incident, it proved very effective. But up to now, every time we dedicated something in the program, I said, let's hope that we'll never use it. So I'm happy with that.
Now, what do you think Israel's going to be doing in terms of missile defense going forward to deal with
we are doing
threats?
quantities.
Or long-range threats?
Long-range threat, we are doing the Arrow 3 now. It's in production, which is even more capable than Arrow 2. We are doing the David Sling, which is an intermediate level. Everything is in production together with the United States. It's jointly manufactured, jointly developed, jointly manufactured, and jointly funded. So it's a long-term program. It's instituted in our defense budget, so no arguments about it. So we are doing the best we can.
I wanted to ask you about what Israel can do besides defensive steps to counter Iran's missile program. Has Israel been taking any more kind of offensive actions to stop Iran from developing all kinds of missiles?
I don't think so. Iran is 1,200 kilometers away. And I don't think that Israel would intervene forcefully within Iran. It's not to Israel's, not on missiles. It's not to Israel benefit to do that. It's destabilizing the whole situation for what? I mean, they have the program. I hoped it could be stopped. It might be stopped or at least toned down. But we also see the positive side of it, because the Iranians are, I think, unwisely using their missiles, flourishing the missiles, and creating quite dissatisfaction and unrest in the Sunni Middle East. And the Iranian missile threat is actually causing very, very strange backlash, which throws the Sunni Arabs and Israel together in the same bed, and creating a lot of cooperation, as we hear in the papers, between Israel and other Arab states that was never before. And that is partly because of the aggressive way the Iranians are flourishing and using their missiles.
So I wanted to follow up on that point also. How much has Iran's missile program pushed Arab countries into considering an alliance or partnership with Israel?
I think that from unofficial contacts with fellow scholars in the Gulf area, the Gulf states are very concerned, very, very concerned. They are a stone's throw away from Iran, and even like Israel, short-range stuff can hit them, long-range stuff can hit them. And they see the Iranian build-up, and they are really worried. You see they are building missile shields of their own, buying from the United States. Saudi Arabia is not just concerned. Saudi Arabia is under actual attack by Iranian-made missiles. Well, they deny it, but it's Iranian-made missiles. I mean, I don't need the United Nations to see the missile, to breed the missile, and identify it immediately. They say that they're made in Yemen. Yemen makes a lot of cut, this intoxicating weed, but Yemen doesn't have any missile industry. So those are Iranian missiles, and I don't think they're wisely, from the Iran point of view, using them against Saudi Arabia. So they're throwing them into their arms. Israel is benefiting from that, very kind of paradoxically. Israel is threatened by Iranian missile, but Israel is also benefiting from the Iranian missile.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about is in the Congress of the United States right now, there are measures being considered, legislation in the House and the Senate, to deal with the Iranian missile program, especially President Trump's demand that Congress pass legislation to force Iran to stop these programs. On the House side, the legislation would call for all Iranian missile activity to be stopped, whereas on the Senate side, legislation right now would require Iran to stop long-range missile development. So what kind of preference do you think Israel has for congressional action on the missile issue?
Look, who am I to advise Congress? But if they would ask my advice, I'd say them, like, there is an international norm against missile proliferation. It's called the Missile Technology Control Regime, which bans the export of any missile that can carry more than 500 kilograms, that's about 1,000 pounds, to a range of more than 300 kilometers, with a very poor accuracy too. There's some accuracy there. Israel is adherent to this missile technology control regime. All the civilized nations in the world are adherents or members in that regime. And I think that if Congress wants to hang on to some parameter which is internationally accepted, the MTCR, the Missile Technology Control Regime, so it's a good starting point. So if countries like all the countries of Eastern Europe, Germany, Russia, contribute to this or sign on this agreement, I think Iran too should abide by it. So the first thing is you don't export anything. Don't send anything to other countries. Don't send to Lebanon, don't send to Syria, don't send to Yemen. So this is level one. Stop not the Iranian missile program, but first stop their proliferation to the rest of the Middle East. And then the Iranian missiles themselves should be toned down to non-threatening parameters that reduce the tension in the Middle East and reduce the threat of instability. And the MTCR is a good starting point.
Yeah, I guess I would just end by asking, Iran says its missile program is for defensive purposes. So do you think Israel would be happy with Iran having a certain level of missile development for defense?
I don't think they need 2,000 kilometers missile for defense. I don't see how a 2,000 kilometers missile is defensive. It's a strictly offensive weapon. We are talking about the security. They call it defense. They're talking about the security, nation security. Yeah, I understand that it's their strategic force. They have no air force to speak about. They have some air force. But the strategic force is missiles. Why? Because of various reasons. The latest, and now they're negotiating a combat aircraft deal with Russia, but the latest combat aircraft they bought was some MiG-29s in the late 90s. So it's very old. They didn't invest in that. They invest in missiles. Why? Because it's more spectacular, it's easier to make, and it looks good. I mean, it's very sexy. It's threatening. It's threatening. They want to project a threatening emotion. I remember Shamkhani saying many years ago, threatening very clearly. I have the quotations that if there is a war, Iran is going to attack the Gulf states. It's going to attack their infrastructure, the power stations, the communication center. I mean, there he was, very explicit. Contrary to other countries, contrary to North Korea, and if you compare them or China in the beginning, instead of hiding their missiles, they were actually exposing them. They used transparency as part of intimidation. So this is part of the destabilizing effect. It's not only that they have them, they just flourish them and threaten how they are going to use them. I think this it would be to the advantage of the Middle East, of all the countries in the Middle East, if all these things will kind of tone down both the actual making of missiles and flourishing them as a threatening stick.
Well, Uzi Rubin, thank you so much for speaking to VOA's Persian service today.